Good afternoon, Frank.
Hello, Professor Spooner.
I think that the world situation, America is playing a part in it, which is, what should I say? Well, of course, we were told in the news that it's the first time in 17 years that America has played this part in the world situation, making everybody worry about about the possibility of a big economic crisis caused by America's failure to pay its bills. Mm-hmm. The way they announced that amused me because it made it sound as though it's longer than it ought to have been, instead of, to say it's the first time in 17 years. Yes. Makes it sound as though it shouldn't have been as long as that.
No, it should happen every couple of years. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
But I've been trying to work out whether there is any other country in which the government can be shut down in this way, and as far as I know, there isn't. And this is supposed to be well, it has a reputation for being the ultimate, most progressive interpretation of the idea of democracy. Mm-hmm. And after all, it's certainly giving enormous privilege, rights, power to a small minority of people who disagree with the rest. Mm-hmm. But one wonders how democracy can continue in the modern world if small numbers of people in large countries have the possibility of standing in the way of all the rest. Seems to me to be a very interesting crisis of democracy.
Well, it is, and I'll make two observations. The first, of course, is historical. Both Hitler and Stalin would periodically fail to understand the forces of democracy that Churchill and Roosevelt had to deal with. And both are on the record as sort of having scratched their heads, wondering why certain measures could not have been agreed to, or perhaps could not have been acted upon unilaterally. The other thing that I've noticed is that, of all people, President Putin of Russia has been quoted a few times as wondering about the American democratic system and why President Obama simply just can't do things. And the other thing I'd mention is that this whole Tea Party phenomenon is, in my opinion, a direct product of the increasing trend in globalization. This could not have happened 20 years ago.
However, why does globalization lead to this?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I'm going to have to get my microscope out and begin to go through the news articles to find out the positive products of globalization to counter this.
Well, you know, my explanation is that the Tea Party is the resistance. It's people trying to hold on to the way the world used to be, the world the way it used to be, and stop that they don't like the rate of change. It's changing too fast for them. And they see themselves as having the opportunity to do something to stop the rot. Because
I agree with you. They're threatened. They believe that they're threatened.
And this, it seems to me, always happens if the rate of change is gets beyond a certain degree, beyond a certain speed. And it keeps on happening. And that's in different places at different times. It's not possible to predict it because you don't know in advance what the rate of change needs to be in order to cause this sort of problem. But as long as because we're getting more accustomed to change all the time. And as we get more accustomed to it, we manage to live with faster rates of change than we used to live with before. But one thing about America is that because there's still quite a large rural population in America, and I think a significant percentage of the Tea Party group are from rural constituencies.
I agree with that.
And it's the rural constituencies in which people are least connected to larger scale activities. And so they're less included in the most progressive developments of change in the country. They're least like New Yorkers. Not that I think New Yorkers are wonderful necessarily anyway, but New Yorkers are used to dealing with large numbers of other people all the time, whereas in the Tea Party constituencies, they're not used to dealing with large numbers of people all the time. And that seems to me to be the big, what causes the difference.
Well, I agree with that, and then unfortunately, for the majority of the people in this country, because of the way the institutional process in the House of Representatives has been structured, this block of 50 or so Tea Party members are essentially able to force their will upon the rest of the country.
And now, to what extent does gerrymandering play a part in this?
Well, I think it actually, the Republicans have made a serious long-term error here because of the gerrymandering that they've managed to effectuate by their control of the state houses over the past 10 or so years and the state assemblies, by and large. So what that means is that these are now largely inherently safe Republican districts. So incumbent Republican Congress people don't have too much to fear in a general election, but they have an awful lot to fear in a primary election. And we've seen a number of instances where well-known names have in fact been bumped off in primaries by extreme right-wing Tea Party people who emerged from the woods, to use the rural metaphor, who emerged from the woods saying that these people are too darn liberal. And you've seen some real right-wing people tossed out already who by any measure or logical definition would never be considered liberal. Replaced by Cro-Magnons, Neanderthals, Luddites.
You're doing well. So the first feature, the first factor is the rate of change and the unevenness in the rate of change, even in a place like America. And you can imagine that that's going to be far more of a consideration in places like Russia and China than it is here. So Putin there may be things that will make life difficult for Putin that he's not become aware of yet. Another factor is the fact that something has happened that makes people have much less of a sense of responsibility than they used to have. 50 years ago, there was a similar differential in the rates of change, but nobody would have felt that they could possibly do what they're doing now in order to get their own way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Everybody would have done what they needed to do to make the system work.
Mm-hmm. What's happened, it seems, is it's reverted to a kind of trend that we see in the Middle East, where people are allegiant only to their own tribe, and they don't care about anybody else.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that 800,000 people have ceased to get their salary payments because they get them directly from the government. Aren't these people voting? I mean, aren't they going to vote in the next election? Maybe not in the rural constituencies.
Right, right.
It's a very different sort of sense of responsibility compared to what used to be normal. Mm-hmm. I don't know when they told us that this hasn't happened for 17 years. They didn't tell us the first time it happened, but I think the first time it happened was not before 1980, was it?
It was after 1980. It was when Bill Clinton was the president and Newt Gingrich was the speaker. And the shutdown, I think the shutdown lasted maybe 25 hours.
So that was in the 1990s that it first happened.
I believe so, yes.
Because Clinton became president in 92?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I believe the shutdown might have been 96 or 95. It was.
Yeah. So there's obviously a qualitative change in what people think they can do for their own interests in relation to everybody else's interests. Mm-hmm. And this is different from what it would have been a generation ago. So the 1990s isn't that far back.
No, no.
And then I think there's the third factor is that people can get into this situation of having this incredible power. A small group of people, I'm not sure exactly how many they are, in relation to a population of over 300 million, without any training, without any experience, just from having got themselves popularly elected according to criteria that have nothing to do with merit.
It's a strange way to run a country. There's no doubt about it. And I'm telling you, if I mean, I brought up those analogies with Stalin and Putin sort of on purpose. I mean, you wouldn't see this happening. Oh, God forbid, I'm not going to even say China, but I mean, you wouldn't. I mean, somebody, and I understand that you have to give things up to live in a bit of a more authoritarian government, but I sometimes wish that we did, because this is plainly ridiculous. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, and I don't frankly see any improvement here. I mean, it's going to be continued paralysis.
Okay, but we're both optimists, basically, right? So we can't finish our session like this.
Oh no, I don't want to finish. I have another thing. Do you know that over the past 3 weeks, 650 people in Shanxi province in central China have been bitten and stung by giant Asian locusts, and 45 of them have died? The toxin is apparently so venomous it causes almost immediate organ failure, only remedied by immediate dialysis, which in this fairly rural province is few and far between. And the reason given for this swarm of hornets is encroaching urbanization.
What's the connection to urbanization?
Well, I mean, I guess that this increasing urbanization and cities has begun to pop up in areas that the hornets live in.
But are they hornets or locusts?
They're hornets. They're hornets.
Hornets. Okay.
Asian hornets. It was amazing. It was an unusual article, but apparently it's a big problem. And I mean, it all goes back in some strange respects to what we're talking about. There's increasing globalization that's given rise to the Tea Party, that's causing people to form into these conurbations, to live together so they can feed off of each other.
The hornets don't have political power. They're not a factor in democracy.
No, I mean,
but I think that one of the, I mean, how I would understand what you're referring to is that our species is gradually taking over control of all other species, and there are a few species that can rebel against that. Many can't, but maybe the poisonous hornets can. But what their chances are in the long run, I'm not sure.
No, they're probably pretty dim. Yeah.
But, however, what do you think that about the future of democracy? After all, with the rising effectiveness of public opinion, the fact that larger and larger percentage of people all the time are participating in decision making and in political activity and so on, is that going to mean that this Tea Party activity is just the first example of the sort of thing that is going to plague us in the future, or is there a way for that to play itself out and develop into something else which will work? After all, we can't go back to authoritarian governments because it's becoming very difficult for any authoritarian government to maintain its authority.
Right.
So my expectation is that it's going to lead to a gradual but continuous weakening of central government. And much more is going to start to happen on the local level rather than on a large national level. However, it's difficult to see how this is going to work because local government has always been the main weakness of democratic systems.
That's true. That's true. I think there's also going to be a significant response. All right. I think we've seen the seeds for that. I think we've seen that in Obama's 2008 election. I think we saw it in the 2012 Obama re-election. The majority, the people who are not Tea Party members, all right, I think this time there's going to be a reaction. And those same tools, those same weapons that the Tea Party used in order to mobilize and to become a force, I think that's going to happen. I think there's going to be such a reaction. And I would suggest this. Keep your eye on Michael Bloomberg, who's worth some $25 billion, who is openly talking about the formation of a third party. And a third party could change the mix in this country in a very, very big way. And that would mean minority elected presidents. Bill Clinton, his first term was a minority elected president. He had far less than 50% of the vote because of the Ross Perot factor. And it's very typical in Western democracies in Europe, coalition building. And I think if that sort of thing begins to happen, I think that will be a positive change.
That's an interesting thing to point to because of look what's happened to Angela Merkel in the last couple of weeks. And it's still not clear what sort of government that's going to lead to.
Well, Italy
is having a similar problem, although, of course, Italy's had this problem for over 50 years.
Right.
England is already living with the problem. But every effort to develop a third party in this country has so far failed, so it would be an enormous change if one actually succeeded. But I think Bloomberg probably stands a better chance of succeeding than Ross Perot did.
Yes. I think he does. I mean, he's got electoral experience. He has a lot more money. He has a pretty well built-in network. And personally, I, for one, a lifelong Democrat, I would seriously consider supporting an initiative like that from him. I think things are, if only because of the long-term potential outcome. All right.
And he's got some experience.
He sure does. He sure does. He's got a lot of experience in a couple of different venues.
I knew we could end on a note of optimism.
You're an incurable optimist. I'll grant you that much. So, all right, Professor, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to talking next week.
Okay.
All right, bye.